I don't care what anybody says. You're never going to stop learning. So any of these guys that pat themselves on the back, that know everything, they're just foolish because it's always changing.
You want to feel the difference. And when that rod tip is too stiff, that very subtle, different pull is indiscernible from those little taps.
People will go up, they don't see bass popping, they make a couple casts, they leave. But they don't take the time to try and figure out what's going on under the surface.
You know, they'll sit there, do 5 of those drifts and not catch one fish and just go. They'll just keep going to the next spot, next spot. Right. Not me, I'm staying there.
You know, you have that moment with all sorts of species of fish where you realize you are not the one that's got the upper hand in the fight, and I realized that very quickly. That fish, it took off, it dug my rod tip right into the water.
Hello and welcome to the Salt Strong live stream and podcast. My name is Rich Natoli. I'm the regular host of this show, and I'm joined, as usual, by the lovely and talented Ed Gobo, owner of Captain Hank's Tackle. Ed, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, Rich. I'm doing good. A little sad that I wasn't able to get out to the show this weekend, but I did have 2 birthdays that I had to attend to. So sorry to all my fans I wasn't able to make an appearance. But
yes, people were asking about you.
Listen, I'm nothing special, but I'm happy to be back doing this. It's been a couple weeks. So
we've got one in the chat right now, James Flynn. He came up purposefully not to say hi to me, but to say hi to you. You weren't there.
Sorry, James. Hi. I'll say hi now.
Yeah, so I was at the Philadelphia Fishing Expo Thursday. Well, Thursday was set up. So Friday through Sunday in the Salt Strong booth, it was great. Got to meet a lot of members, got a bunch of people that signed up and joined the Insider Club. And man, I just talked fishing continuously throughout the weekend, which I absolutely love, and I want to keep doing it, but my voice is failing right now. I tried not to talk much today, which is tough when you make videos for a living, and I got through today, and I feel it failing. So we'll see what we can do to get through this.
We're gonna have to teach you sign language or something.
I'm gonna have to. No, I'm not smart enough for that. We're just gonna have to muddle through. So last week we were not on. We apologize for that, but hey, it's a live stream. Stuff comes up, and when key people can't make it, we can't go live, and there's just nothing we can do about it. But for those that have been watching this for a while, you know that every once in a while it happens, and that's a live stream. So we're back this week. We have Chris Matuson coming on. And actually, let's bring Chris on right now. Chris is, as I bring him on stream, I want to introduce him to everyone. Chris, how you doing?
Good. How are you guys? Great to see you again.
Good. Welcome back.
I'm doing great. I want to make sure that we give you the introduction because I don't believe you've been on since we moved over to the Salt Strong platform with the live stream.
Correct.
Okay, so Chris he's got a couple of interesting distinctions on here. He was the first one I was afraid to approach to come on as a guest because I didn't know if he'd want to share. And
it's horrible.
Now that I know him, I feel silly about it. Chris is also under the podcast episode that he did now it's on Salt Strong, but the previous platform was the number one. It was the first one and the number one podcast episode that we did. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is not only is Chris just really knowledgeable about this backwater striped bass fishing and redfish. We'll talk about redfish too. New Jersey redfish tonight.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. We're gonna have to talk about that. We're gonna have to break out of the striped bass just for a minute to talk about that. But man, really knowledgeable about it, but it's backwater striped bass. And that is just, it's that time of year. You guys, you have the New Jersey folks, you have a lot of New York folks, people that just, maybe you can go out in some places and you can do catch and release. But a lot of people are kind of stuck inside for a couple of months. And that's about to end. So yes. March 1st in New Jersey, we're going to have a lot of people coming down from New York. We're going to have a lot of people coming from Pennsylvania. The Delaware folks have been out there fishing, and they're still actually getting some really nice fish down in Maryland, especially in Chesapeake, are just continuing to hammer them, but it's opening back up. So Chris, welcome tonight. And I've been looking forward to this one. Ed and I have been talking about this one since really December, that we had to have you come back and kick it off again this year. So It's going to be fun.
Listen. I'm really flattered by you guys. I'm just a guy who loves to fish, especially the striped bass, and we'll talk about why. But I'm really excited about this year. Last year I wasn't too really excited to get at it out of the gate because the winter was so cold last year. But this year, with the mild winter, I think it's going to be identical to 2 years ago. Is it 2 or 3 years ago? 2 years ago, and it started off immediately. So I'm really excited this year.
I remember last year the conversation. It was about a week and a half or 2 weeks before the opening,
right?
And you were like, I don't know how it's going to be. We just had this dip, and it was down in the teens at night, and
yep, it's horrible.
And the water temperatures were in the mid to upper 30s, and we're looking at low 40s right now.
Yeah, I think pretty much all winter it's kind of stayed, except when we had those 5 or 6 days where it was like below zero outside.
Right.
I think pretty much it's like, from what I've seen, it's sitting around 43 constantly. So I mean, that gives everybody a huge advantage right out the gate. Last year it was difficult the entire month of March. I mean, you can still catch fish, but probably I don't think it warmed up until like May last year, right?
Yeah,
like
it was.
April was just horrible. It was windy every day at nighttime. I remember there were so many nights I passed up. But this year, I mean, the tides don't look fantastic, to say the least, for the first couple of days. The tides are good right now. Figures it's
right.
really good out. Probably right about now. I think high tide tonight was a couple local spots, or like 8 something. But after we get through the first couple of days of March, we got another moon coming again. So I think it's going to kick off fantastic. I'm really eager this season. So
I am too. And you'll be out opening day, I guess, whether the tides are good or not, or are you going to wait until it lines up?
No, I have to, because my wife will look at me like, you talk all this and then you don't even go. So regardless, I'll be out there one way or the other. With those tides, I really don't have huge expectations, but like if opening day was like right now, this week, with the tide phase, with the moon phase and the tides, I'd be super psyched. But I think regardless, even with lower tides, I think we're going to see bass early up on the flats this season. Last year was tough again because the flats stayed really, really cold for a while. I remember wading a local river a couple of times last year, and I mean, I couldn't even feel my thighs standing out there waist deep for a couple hours just looking for one bite. I do not think that'll be the case this year. I think it's going to start heavy, and I think it's going to start heavy with big bass too. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of big bass up in the rivers and in the bay already. I've heard some reports of guys, targeting perch that have gotten a few nice ones, and I guess we can talk about that later about this whole close season thing here in New Jersey. But yes. I've gotten some really, really good reports so far. And not just, whether you like it or not. I mean, there's still guys that go out and target right now. And, those guys are using artificials and really not having any issue of having them bite artificials either. So.
Right. So let's point out, to Chris's point. Yes. I do want to talk today about the conservation side and the closed season versus a catch and release season. So we'll get to that towards the end of this. And I do promise we have several people that watch regularly that ask that we try to include something around the conservation side, even if it's just how to release fish, right? So we're going to talk about that today. I do need to say, though, if you're in New Jersey or you're fishing in New Jersey from Salt Strong, it is illegal to target them. As Chris said, we all know people that are. And I'll tell you this, that you don't even have to go out and target them, because if you just look at Maryland, which really in the Chesapeake, which has the same conditions setting up, and we're talking rivers right now, right? These tidal rivers, these brackish rivers, they have the same situation setting up down there. They have the same water temperatures in the Chesapeake. You look at the, pick any river, the Patuxent, well, that's further south, but any of those rivers, the bass are in there. They were up in the past week feeding in the shallows, so less than 10 feet of water. and they're holding at the mouths of these rivers, and they're starting to move up already. So this is like an early launch. I do remember, Chris, last year, what was the opening of fluke season? It was like May 5th, I think, something around.
I think
first
so.
week in May.
Yeah, it was really early.
I remember stepping into that water, and
It's crazy.
Cold. It was so cold. It turned out to be 40 degrees in May, and that was the warmest that it had been in all year. And so May 2nd is what Heaven and Elle is saying in chat. So May 2nd, and that was one of the reasons that I ended up getting my NRS boundary boots, because I used to just step in with sneakers and socks on and just let them dry during the day, and I suffered that day.
I think I was with you that day.
You were with me that day.
I do believe I was with you that day.
It was not good.
And I can tell how warm the water is, not even walking in the water down here, but to cure that itch this winter. I've been going up to Pennsylvania, where I grew up. I think I made 3 trips in like 9 days. The first time I ever really targeted freshwater trout in the winter. I've studied it the last couple years and kind of went and taught myself, where to locate them, holdover fish. And it was a good time. But I think what made it even more enjoyable was that the water was not cold.
Right.
Even in those streams, which a lot of them are usually iced over, many parts of them are, and it's just frigid water. But I never got cold in my boots. My hands didn't get warm, releasing fish. So if that's any sign of the water down here, which up there it would usually be much colder, I think we're definitely much further ahead than last year. Probably 6 or 7 degrees in some spots.
Yeah.
And like you were talking about in May, that was the latest year date-wise that I got onto a topwater bite. It was pretty much just about into June. I think we did our show at the end of May, beginning of June last year. I had just finally got into some fish, but the middle of May usually is a good time for me. And the water was just, I'm pulling my plug out of the water, and it was no wonder they weren't biting it. It was just frigid. But we're on a much better track this year.
That was out like that one night in March we got out, Chris. It was frigid, cold, and windy. That was, I think, the biggest killer last year was the wind.
Yep. Yeah, well, I felt bad that night because I had really, really high expectations. But and that's one thing that I learned a long time ago is that it can change just like that, and it's not anything you're doing. It's just the wind. The wind can lower that temperature just by a couple degrees, or it can lower the air temperature by 15 or 20 degrees. And I think at that night we were out, it was coming in our face like really, really bad.
Yeah, it was wicked. But that also that also kind of plays into this question that Edwin put up about a strong wind killing a backwater bite. So I
don't know that that's a fact.
Yeah, I don't think it kills the bite. I think it
depends on the wind, right, Chris?
Right. It'll kill the water temperature coming from certain directions. But if it's 45 degrees outside and the water temperature is low 40s, but you get a strong south wind that day, I mean it can raise it 4 or 5 degrees. Now if you get a heavy northeast or even like a west wind, shouldn't really cool it off too much this time of year. But it's blowing in your face, fishing in a lot of spots, and makes it difficult to cast. So I don't think it kills the bite. It can kill the water temperature depending on degrees, but at the same time, still water is not ideal conditions for spring bass. I have a friend of mine that I fish with a lot in early spring, and every time we go, I say, "Oh, it's just no wind today. It's just no good." And like, well, I don't like 20 mile an hour winds. Like, well, I like that northwest wind, 30 miles an hour in my face. And, my man slays fish in wind like that. So, wind definitely can be your friend, but early in the season, it can mess with that water temperature. So I think that's why people think it kills the bite.
Yeah, it really depends on what's the air temperature. If you have 40-degree water, and for those that haven't seen it, I did video on this last week on Salt Strong. You can take a look at it. It's the effective wind on the 90-10 zone. So, let's just talk about that. The 90% of the feeding fish are in 10% of the water, And the wind, if it's 40-degree water and it's 20-degree wind, you need to find somewhere that's out of the wind, because the area that's getting churned by that wind is cooling. It's cooling down. Correct. And it's the still water that's going to be warmer. However, still water, as Chris just mentioned, isn't the best for striped bass. So you got two things working against you there. But if you have a 60-degree wind or 55-degree wind, which you had today, blowing across 44, 43-degree water, it's warming the water. So in that case, you can go and find that wind-blown side, find that water that's churning in the current, and you can actually get into them. You know, Edwin's not wrong, though. I mean, it can shut it down. He's right. It can shut it down if it comes from a certain direction. It can certainly shut down your casting if you have to cast into that wind and you're trying to reach a spot that's not easy to reach. So I don't want to say he's wrong, but there are cases where the wind is going to help. So Chris, let's talk about this, because man, people are really looking forward to this, and they're really looking for spots. I'm not asking you to share spots, and I'm doing that for two reasons. First of all, I don't want you to. Second of all, I know you won't. But let's talk about a general description. You know, we have people in here right now, Connecticut, which, by the way, congrats on Connecticut for not having ice on those rivers up there right now. You're still hitting bass up there, like in the Housatonic. But let's talk about, what's the general description of an area. Let's say we just dropped you somewhere with a map and a satellite image and maybe Navionics, so you could see the bottom contours. What are you going to look for when you're looking for your spot?
So definitely some water movement. You know, even and that's where I think the wind plays in. Where if you're looking for some water movement, outgoing tide, incoming tide, like last year. Like I'm a big outgoing tide guy, but I think we talked last year that I didn't get any fish on outgoing. I got them on incoming, and I think because the bay water was so cold, incoming you got a little bit of water from the ocean that kind of warmed it up. But it was always moving current. The flats, and any flats where there's just there's a nice drop off at some point, but the sun hits those flats during the day and warms up the mud. That's another spot you want to look for. But my biggest thing is some type of moving water. Definitely don't like that still water, and I don't like small moon phases either. Big moon, big current after that first or second hour. I don't like it when it's raging, where you're throwing a half ounce out, and by the time you crank it twice, now it's already some cases maybe, I mean, if they're sitting down current, but some nice even water movement, that's what I look for. And also, if it's earlier in the day, midday after the sun has hit, some nice mud flats. That's pretty much key for me. The two areas I look for in the early spring.
Something that heats up. Now, are you going more towards, so you're going to fish, I'm guessing, primarily along rivers, right? Or are you actually venturing further out into the bays away from the river flows? I'm talking early season, let's say the first 2 to 3 weeks.
I'll do both. Again, I think that water temperature will lead you to still be able to get some decent quality fish in the back bay, and you don't necessarily have to go into the river. I think if you're looking for bigger numbers of fish and some bigger fish, even though you can get, big fish in the bay, but if you're looking for, spawners or, high 30s or 40-inch fish, then definitely, the river. But then you need to figure out, how far upriver have they gone? How far up has the migration gone at this point? And usually what we see on the years where the winter's been warmer, they'll go further up the river earlier on. So I think the beginning of May, the first March, the first 2 weeks is a lot of, it's trial and error. You have to be able to get out there, put your boots on, walk around. I don't stay at a spot very, very long, because when the water's not cold, but colder, they tend to kind of bunch up. So if you're not getting anything, let's move. If you get into one or two fish, there's probably a lot more fish in that general area. So, anywhere where there's a drop off, if you're in a kayak or out in a boat, some type of shelf, something like that. But definitely, if you have sunny days and it warms that water up, that's a bonus. And,
Look for the
any
mud.
type of, and a wind driven bank, where again, depending on the wind direction, can heat it up a little bit. And, if you're using plugs or, we talked before, I don't use any bait. It's all artificials. You want a little bit of turbulation, on that water to kind of confuse the fish a little bit, so they really can't get a hard look at it, what they're about to bite. So,
Right.
a lot of factors, but I would go out in the winter when you couldn't fish, just to look at tides, because you can really see then where the mud flats stop and where the drop off starts. I was coming out of Atlantic City yesterday with my kids, and we drove past a couple spots, and it was a crazy blowout tide. And just by doing that, no matter where you're at, you can tell so much, because usually there's areas that are bare with water. Once the water warms up and the tide comes up, the bait comes up and gets pushed up, and people, everybody can kind of figure out the rest. But those are the couple things to definitely look for. But it's a lot of trial and error the beginning of March, especially if you haven't done it in March. It's easy to get discouraged. You go out a couple nights and it's like, man, like wasting a lot of time. Or you go out to the river and you're walking the bank, and again, you just got to pay attention to that wind and temperature, and just keep putting the boots to it. So
yeah, I picture you driving home and pulling over on the side of the road. Kids look at that and they're like, come on, Dad, can we just go home? You're looking at mud together.
Yep. My son freshwater fishes with me a lot. My daughter's she's done some topwater striped bass with me before. She really enjoyed it, but he's a little young for me to take out to some of the spots I go, because if you don't know the bank, it's real sketchy. I took him out one time a couple years ago, and I just was losing my mind. Like, he had just regular boots on. He's jumping around, and the tide was dropping and the mud was slippery. And I said, we're just going to leave you home, because it's just not working out for me. But, like tonight, if we weren't on the show, I'd probably be out, scouting, because again, there are certain spots where you can see, you can see them. You could tell what's happening there. If it's not too windy, you can, look at, they'll break the surface if they're there. So it's, I'm excited. Last year, I didn't see really any of that. So last year told me early on it was going to be difficult, but again, guys that, moved up the river early, they did really, really well. But I fished the bay more than the river. Some years it pays to go up the river more, but I think this year you'll do well in both. So.
Yeah, I agree. And with this being so early this year, assuming it holds for the next 8 days, 9 days, I wouldn't be shocked if you have them all the way up the river and all the way down the river. Just, I think it's filled up at this point. And the people that aren't supposed to be fishing, that talk about catching things when they're quote unquote perch fishing, they've been all over. I will mention, be careful if you're going to fish all the way up the rivers, make sure you have your freshwater license. There are certain points where it does switch over, and you don't want to get caught without one. Even if it's a mistake, it's a preventable mistake. So make sure you get your freshwater license if you're going to venture up into those things. So let's talk about gear real quick. I know we've covered this in previous conversations, but we have a lot of new people watching this right now. So just a quick rundown of your actual rod, reel, braid, and leader sizes that you're using. Then we'll get into the terminal stuff after that.
So 2 words, John Creeley, as far as the rod goes. So he made me a custom rod last year for Back Bay. I used it in the Salt too this year. It was fantastic. But even with that rod aside, I go with a 7.6. That's pretty much my go-to in the back. Depending on what you're throwing, whether it's I'll go with a fast action or I like a fast action rod, but usually, medium heavy, 15-pound braid this time of year. I usually put on like a 2 or 3 foot, probably a 2 foot, 20-pound mono leader. So I still get some really, really good feel there. You'll hopefully get into some nicer fish, but nothing that I'm worried about breaking me off, or I'm not really fishing a whole lot of structure this time of year either, so I'm not worried about it fraying up and breaking off. As far as reels go, a 3000 reel, whether it's a Daiwa, Shimano, or VR50, some people call them junk, but I mean, I've had one for a couple years now. I've used it in the surf. I've used it in the Caribbean. I've used it back bay. I've used it in the river. Fantastic reel, fantastic drag system. And as far as lures go, anything from a quarter ounce, so half an ounce, I'll use jig heads depending on what what the tide strength is, and some 3 to 4 inch plastic tails, usually Northeast jig. 2 years ago, I was doing really, really good on the ripper shads. Last year, they wanted I think we were laughing because they wanted like the 5-inch mullets in March last year. And mag darters if I'm going at nighttime. I just keep it really, really simple. The bag gets bigger as you go into the spring, later in the spring and summer and fall, but soft plastics and mag darters. There's a couple other things I throw as far as plugs go, but you just really kind of need to figure out where the fish are sitting in the water column, whether it's like a hydro minnow or a redfin, something like that. But yeah, but as far as size too, the small plastics I kind of keep a little on smaller size, but we've gotten them on 7-8 inch plugs in March too. So if you're up the river, herring, obviously, if you've seen the herring run the last few years, I mean, we're not talking herring this big. We're talking herring that are, a foot long or longer in some cases. So that whole where people used to say, they won't bite artificials when it's cold water, or you have to lower the size down of your presentation. That's not really true either. In some cases, you match the hatch with the bait, but if I don't see a lot of bait around, I really won't knock the size down, because some of those bass are hungry after the winter, and they see a big meal regardless of the size, they're gonna bite right on it. So
yeah, I tend to start, I think, around the 4-inch. I'm looking at that. The 4-inch size is where I'm going to start. 3.5 is fine, but I typically recommend to people start with the 4. And if you're using the salt strong things, it's a mulligan or it's a diesel minnow, like a Z-Man diesel.
Right. And
then you can go up to the bombers that are 5-inch, and then you can go up outside. You can still get Z-Mans up to 7 inches. So if you want to stay in there, you mentioned Northeast Jig. They have up to 5, I believe. 5-inch, I think, is their largest size.
They made a bigger a couple of years ago. They made a 6-inch, which is a really, really big profile too. But I don't think they make them anymore.
Is that the Moab?
No,
I think that's that's different.
Okay.
Yeah, these were still the ripper shad.
Gotcha.
But I think 4 is like the fantastic, regardless of the brand. Yeah, that's the good universal size, and it's got a really nice profile to it. They have that size when you see it coming through the water. I mean, that fits a lot of bait fish that time of year, and you can't go wrong when you start that size. Like you said, you can either move up, move down, but sometimes if you start too small, then it's this real big guessing game. But 4 to 5 inch plugs and 4-inch plastics. That's I keep it very basic this time of year.
Yeah. And what depth are you looking at for your first night out? If you just had to guess, what's the depth going to be that you're going to be targeting from the sod banks?
3 to 4 feet probably, because I mean I prefer to catch fish in shallow water. I think the strikes are fantastic. They fight so much better in that skinny water when they're trying to get away and they're trying to dive, and when they're diving, all they're doing is hitting the mud. There's really no place to go. So I think those are like some of the real epic battles you can get year round. But in the spring, I mean, the fish are full of energy. Ones that I have caught in really, really cold weather, they fight like there's no tomorrow. And when you release them, they have no problem getting away pretty quick. So that's usually the depth, but again, it's a guessing game really based on that water temperature. And if it's an outgoing, as the tide subsides, then obviously, I'm gonna move out further, 6-7 feet. But there's during the day, I'll wait out the spots that are, you're throwing 8 to 10 feet, maybe even deeper than that if you're, we can get out far enough and hit the channel. But I prefer to start shallow, then go deeper, because if they're on those flats and now you start to walk out or whatever, they may be sitting right in front and you kind of just spook them. But you could definitely find them shallow water in March, no doubt.
Yeah. So I want to bring this comment up, and I'll start on it, and then Chris, you can jump on it afterwards. From our buddy, Mr. Poseidon. I saw this one come up, and I know, Ed, you have other ones that were in before this, just because I saw it come
That's
by.
fine.
Don't believe in larger lures, bigger fish. I'll give my perspective, and then Chris and Ed be interested in yours. I do believe that is true sometimes. I do believe that sometimes when you're into a hot bite, especially, it's a good idea to continually upsize until you can, especially when you have mixed fish, right? If you have schoolie, if you have rats, schoolies, slots, let's say anything from 20, depending on where you are, 25 up to 38 inches. And then you have the over slots, the jumbos that are in there as well.
Sure.
It's fine to start with the 4, and with a 4 you can get any of them. But if you notice that you're getting something that's in the it's all schoolies, but you think there's bigger, then you go up to the 6,
right?
And then now you're getting something in the slot, and then but you think there might be something bigger. Well, then you go to 9, and then you're getting the upper slots, and then you go to 10, and we had a guy on Sean Kimbrough, he was talking about how they used to cut up plastics and start super gluing them together until they had 20-inch lures, and that's where they're catching the 50, 60 pounders. Huh. But that's because they're weeding them out, right? So they're weeding them out at that time, but they're not, as he mentioned, they're not starting with that. They're starting down at the lower sizes, and they're kind of prospecting. And I think this is, to your point, Chris, this is a good time of year to do that. Go with something that you can get everything on.
Yep.
And then maybe start upsizing. What's your thought on that, Chris?
I don't necessarily agree that large fish, you need large lures. We talked before where I've gone and fished for tarpon. I mean, you're talking 50, 60, 70-inch tarpon on a 5-inch Zara spook. I mean, that's not a big bait by any means for a fish that size, but sometimes there were times where I was throwing out like a 2 or a 3 ounce spook and nothing. You put the smaller one on and it was game on. So, whether sometimes they look at it as, it's an easier prey, the smaller fish. But yeah, it definitely does not equal out where you have to use a big lure to catch a big fish. But at the same time, we talked in the past too that you don't necessarily need to downsize when you go into the back bay either. You can still use the same size lures you use in the summer or you use in the surf, and you don't necessarily have to change that. But no, I agree with that. Yeah, definitely do not have to use supersized lures for big fish. I mean, look at a lot of the breeders that are caught up the Delaware, 40, 50-pound bass on a chunk of bloodworms.
Right.
Well, there's your answer right there. I mean, when you're talking a pot of bloodworms, maybe a little bit bigger, but again,
it's smaller than a golf ball usually.
Yeah, it's much smaller than
especially the price of them things nowadays.
Yeah,
one bloodworm bag this year is going to cost like $60.
I'll dig up some night crawlers in the backyard and prick my finger and put some blood on them. That's insanity. I mean, that's just a crazy price, but. Yeah, so I mean that could go either way, but. Mm-hmm.
All right, Ed. Were there other questions in there, or do you want me to go on to the next one?
Well, no, I know you wanted. I thought you said you wanted my comment on it, but Nick kind of stole that. Elephants eat peanuts, and that's all that needs to be said.
Yep.
Yeah, they definitely do. All right, so let's talk. You mentioned a bunch of names of the lures that you're using. Let's go through really just your top 5. If you can only bring 5 lures with you in March, and it's a day before the season opens, and you say, okay, I can only bring 5 lures to use for the entire month. What are you putting in that box?
Definitely some 4-inch plastics, 1/4 ounce to 1/2 ounce jig heads to go along with those. A couple pattern mag darters. What's that? Only 2. Red fins, no doubt. Definitely taking a couple of those various sizes. I have a smaller one that's a broken back, but then, I'll throw a 7-inch in there also. Some light bucktails, 1/4 ounce, throw a little trailer on the back, but that's really it, to be honest. I don't even think we could go for a 5th one. It's just very, very simple. I mean, I used to take like a bunch of just extra stuff. Just thinking, well, these aren't working. Let me throw this on. But, what I found is early in the year, it's more just, the water temperature, sometimes a profile size, but again, it just depends on the water temperature and tides for me. But those are the 4 that I go with early.
Gotcha.
Season.
It's funny. You mentioned you wouldn't even bring a 5th. I think one of the worst things that we do, maybe this is a separate topic, but as fishermen, is we go out prepared for everything.
Too much stuff.
It's not that it's too much stuff. It's that we try to use it. If this 4-inch bait isn't working, correct, I'm switching over to the mag darter. If I don't get something in a few casts, I'm going to this. The next thing I know, I'm on bottles, and I'm throwing stuff out that I probably shouldn't be.
Shouldn't even be throwing. Correct.
But what I should have done is stayed with that 4-inch, and knowing that I only have a few lures to try, and changed the retrieve pattern. Change where I'm throwing it, change the presentation, slow it down, speed it up, do something different rather than just switch to an entirely different profile lure. And I know I've been guilty of that. And Ed and I were talking last fall where we went out, or no, I guess it was over the winter. And I didn't even bring
we talk all the time.
Yeah, I didn't even bring a crate. I left all my stuff at home, and then the stuff that I brought, I left all of it except for just the only stuff that I had, I put in my drive system. So my kayak was like empty, and I didn't need anything else.
Correct.
Didn't need anything else. I had all that I needed, and I could have lost a record amount of lures that day for myself and still had plenty of stuff to fish for the rest of the day.
Agreed.
I used to go out with hundreds of soft plastics, dozens of jig heads, different top waters. And, I just wanted to mention that, it's great. We all, part of our obsession is collecting. But it doesn't mean you have to bring your.
I think, and I've just come to this conclusion. So I've just gotten back into archery after being out of it for a long time. And part of the thing with that is muscle memory and getting back into a rhythm. And I think with fishing, it's the same way. So every lure you have has a certain muscle memory and rhythm that you have to get back into. So the more stuff that you're tying on to your line, you're resetting that every time. Something different. It's different every time. So you have to relearn it and get back into that groove. So I think keeping it more simplistic, you're going to get into your groove quicker and you're going to be more successful.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's about what you are comfortable throwing and what you're comfortable, working and retrieving. I think so Lee Wakefield's a really good friend of mine, those guys. And, he's excellent at using bucktails in the bay, which that was never a really big thing for me until maybe 2 years ago. I started using them, especially like later in the year. It was just, I just couldn't get the feel. It just wasn't comfortable for me. So, there'll be a learning curve again. The first week of March after doing all this light trout fishing that I've been doing, because, you're throwing, 1/16 ounce Panther Martins, and you're just tossing them maybe 5 feet out and working on a 4-foot rod. I mean, it's big difference going back now to a 7.6, 15, 20 pound line, throwing, half ounce, 3/8. It's totally different, but, lure presentation, along with those other weather factors, that's huge. So like you mentioned, both of you guys, you could change the lure as many times you want, but if your presentation is not correct, you may be throwing the right lure, but, are we just a straight retrieve? Is it too fast, too slow? Do we need to twitch it? Do I need to let that soft plastic hit the bottom? Do I need to just pop it off the bottom and just, or a straight retrieve? It's so much trial and error. And I think that's what that second week of March is for, is really to get back into the groove of that and kind of figure out what patterns are working. As you get into April, May, eventually all your patterns are going to kind of come together, because again, once the water gets to a certain temperature, right, everything's active and everything pretty much shows up where they're supposed to be. But the key to the success early in the season is, even over top of everything we talked about, is patience. Which I don't have a lot of. I fish fast. I fish aggressive. I don't like. Yeah, I don't. No, I'm not an aggressive guy at all. But I'm just not like. and maybe that's why the bait thing just really didn't. It's just not my preference because I just can't stand there and just wait and wait and wait. Even when I take my son freshwater fishing now, like, he'll go with minnows or whatever, but I'm trying to get him now into, little, 2-inch twister tails below a bobber for crappies. And just, it's just so dynamic and the strikes are just so good. But it keeps you busy, just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. But the retrieve is the same thing. It took me, that's probably the hardest thing for me to learn in the straight bass game was to be able to vary up that retrieve, have the patience to slow things down. And, that can be, that could mean everything between, 4 skunk trips or, being really, really successful is just having patience to slow it down.
Yeah, I agree. There's a follow-on question. Were you going to bring that up, Ed?
No, I was actually going to talk on something different, but
let's hit this real quick first, just because it goes along. So you talked about those 4 lures, but Tim brings up a good point. None of us mentioned colors. So are there specific colors that you're going to be throwing on any of those lures at this time of the year?
So if I'm throwing plugs, I'm definitely going to throw like a herring pattern. That's done really well for me in the past. And lures, as far as soft plastics go, white is just the all-around fantastic color, at least what I found, whether it be soft plastics or hard baits. You just can't go wrong with that. I kind of given up on the whole, buying or bringing 5 or 6 different colors. I'll bring something bright, I'll bring a white, and I'll bring a dark. So, during the day, I have had really good success with white, and it sounds like a boring color. It's boring color to look at, especially plugs. Everybody wants to see the greens, the blues, the pinks, the purples. Again, not saying that doesn't work and it doesn't have anything to do with it, but I'm not really big on color. I think that if you can gauge the profile of the bait and the speed of the retrieve, my personal opinion, I think that's better than color. So,
yeah, I'm not huge into colors. I fall kind of where you do. The whites, right? So for the Northeast Jig Company, that's going to be Betty White.
Yep.
And for Salt Strong, it's going to be something like the Slam Shady. Pearl Bone is a popular one. Those are all considered whites. The bright ones, some people go chartreuses. I do like pinks. But then I also like especially in New Jersey, our water is so dirty and ugly, and a clear day you can see 3 feet. So I do like those darker profiles with the sparkle in them. Again, Salt Strong, it would be like an Alabama Leprechaun or a Gold Digger. And what's it called with the dark ones for Northeast? Is it Dreams and Nightmares?
Something along that line, Nightmares and Dreams, or
Nightmares and Dreams, something like that.
That's a great color. I've been out there on new moons and just really slay with those. So the darker the night, darker presentation, lighter the night, more white colors like that. I always bring a mag darter that's yellow. Really, that was usually a freshwater color for me. But a couple years ago, my buddy said, "Man, I'm out here slaying with this yellow, and that's the only thing that works." And
working the school bus.
Damn if he wasn't right. You could throw white all night, and it just wasn't. But water was stained, and the the chartreuse really stuck out. So if I was to give 3 colors, just a darker like black type color, a pink and a white for soft plastics. But if we're talking hard baits, then I would go with a bone or a yellow.
Okay. All right. Ed, you want to go on to the topic you were going to bring up?
Yeah, I guess we could do that. So when Chris was talking about presentation stuff, you also have to feed them what they want to eat. So you have to figure that out. Like I was going to reference the day that I dumped the kayak over, where everybody was we tried like a bunch of different things, and the most productive part of it was actually jigging them off the bottom like fluke.
Right.
Let it hit the bottom and just jig it up a few times. So
it was a snap jig day.
Yes.
It wasn't like a John Skinner jigging. It was snapping. It was the snap jig that was getting them going.
Yep. So
Not
you have
those
to feed
little
them
ones.
what they want to eat. Not so much color. Like that day, color didn't matter. They would hit anything.
Right.
It was just the way they wanted to see it.
Yeah.
And I think of a lot of its location too. Like, there's certain bays and certain rivers that hold certain types of bait more than others, and a certain profile. They had in the fall again, there was that big squid. There was a ton of squid in North Jersey. So people were using, hot pink or squid type imitations. You could search down here all day for a squid and you would never find one. So there's an example of what works and what doesn't. But even though we don't see a lot of squid down here, I'm sure maybe there's a few here or there, but whether it be weak fish or bass, I mean, and Ed, I know we got some mutual friends that they will swear by that pink and they slay on that pink. So, I say to me, color really, really doesn't matter, but in some cases it does. But I think it depends on the area.
Yeah,
and what's available there.
Let's not underestimate the power of confidence. If you truly believe, I don't care what color it is, if you truly believe it works,
it's going to catch. Yep.
You are absolutely going to catch more fish on that than anything else, because I guarantee you your presentation is different when you have that confidence lure on than when you don't. When in doubt, go with what you're confident with.
Right.
One night we did test. There's this odd color. It's a green with an orange tail for weak fish. And side by side, we were fishing the same exact lure, just different colors, green and orange, all night long.
I'm pretty sure I remember seeing some photos with the fish having that hang out of its mouth, and say, boy,
I think I sent you some of those pictures.
That's a unique color. But I agree with the confidence thing. I mean, I have a Zara spook that I've thrown for years, and it's silver and blue, and I catch tons of fish on there. A couple years before that, I was throwing a pink and silver. Last year, it was the blue and silver. If I took off the pink, and I would just try to switch up just to catch fish on different lures, because I get tired of throwing this, just to see if they would bite. Wouldn't touch anything else. Swear to God. Same group of fish, same pockets. It was the silver and blue. But again, I think it goes back to Ed's point, the confidence. I knew I always can catch fish on that color. I would always just anticipate a strike, but when I put something on a different color, it's always like, I don't know if this is going to work. But so maybe that impacts the retrieve. It just impacts the comfortability feeling. But being comfortable in what you throw, that's such a huge part of success, not just in the spring, but really anytime. So I like that we sit here and talk about lures and some stuff that we use early season, but I think the bigger thing people need to remember is some lures you're not going to be comfortable with. They're just not going to be, I'm not a comfortable bait guy. I'm not a comfortable eel guy. Like, I just can't, regardless of the size of the fish. And people call me crazy. I just can't do it. Like, I can't get the feel for that. It's
not your thing.
It's just foreign to me. So, soft plastics, again, if you're just retrieving them and that's working, that's great. But when you have to start bouncing them and pausing them, that may not be for some people, because again, that's where we go back to the patience factor. But being comfortable and having confidence, that's 100%. What needs to be in the lure bag. I mean, your lures are there, but you got to have confidence beyond what you're putting in there. So
yeah, and if you want to try a new bait and you're not confident, put it in as your test. Because then you have all your confidence things and you can get to the point you say, well, let's just see. And then you don't have that pressure to make it perform.
Right.
You've got all those other confidence things. So I want to make sure we talk about what's that?
Me and the dart spins. I can't get them to work. Everybody kills bass on them. I can't get them to work.
Yep.
I love the dart spins. I think that
I love them too.
Amazing.
They don't work.
I hate them when I lose them though. The larger ones you're losing like $10 if you lose the thing, which is.
But I think having your line has a lot to do with that too. Everybody uses braid now, so it's I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know, but the different types of braid, right? You could buy this company's braid, and you could feel every tick of a quarter ounce soft plastic. You buy another company's braid, and it just feels stiff. I found that out this fall. buddy of mine, I got a couple different types of braid and put it on my VR50. I couldn't feel anything all fall. It didn't matter what I was throwing, how light or how heavy. And I wound up ripping it off, and I went back to what I used to use. So
what was that? Because people are going to ask if you don't say it. They're going to start sending me messages. Which braid do you not like?
That in particular was some kind of like new Berkeley that was out, and I just thought it was horrible. But
but that's important, because some people may be listening
like
to everything you say, saying, "Man, he fishes just like me," and they might be thinking about getting the new Berkeley. So it's good. Now, and what do you actually use?
So Power Pro.
Okay.
Super Slick is. I feel everything with that. Everything with that.
That's what I use, and I think Ed used J braid, right?
I've been using J braid. I've been using Suffix. I've tried to stick with the 8-strand braid. I feel like that's more sensitive than, I think it's 4-strand or 4 or 5. But I've noticed that the 8-strand's a lot more sensitive, and it's smoother too.
I used the 832 for a couple years, and that's really, really good line. I used for about 3 years. I used the spider wire, the not the run of the mill spider wire, but it was like the camo. It was like a blue, a white, whatever. I'll next time we talk, or I'll put it in the comments tomorrow. I'll put the type of line, but it was maybe like $16 a pack, and it was fantastic. It never broke on me. It threw a country mile, and guys were laughing like, spending that money on spider wire, you got to put this on and put that on. I don't use it now only because it's harder to get. I think they've changed the design, so it's tough for me to get the ones that I used to get. But
I've never had luck with spider wire.
You have to be, it's got to be what's comfortable for you. But I don't want to bash certain braid companies. I've never used Yozuri, but I know guys that they swear by that, whether they get it for free or they're on their sponsor thing or whatever. But even if I was getting it for free, if it wasn't working for me, and I wasn't, I couldn't get the feel of the lure, that's a huge thing. But line is a big deal.
Yeah. So we have about 10 minutes left. We have to talk redfish. So Ed, you want to get, and we have to talk a little bit about some of the conservation type of stuff. So Ed, do you want to just bang through some questions here that are in there?
We got two that are noteworthy because we were on the lure subject. When you try to mix in top water?
Really, once the temperature hits a certain degree. I mean, whether it's May, whether it's June, but once we get into the, you could still catch them if they were hungry enough and there's bigger bait around. If the water's in the 50s, but my magic number is anywhere from, I don't know, low 60s. Low 60s is big for me. And again, whether that's the beginning of May or beginning of June, the earlier the better. But you definitely should not shy away from throwing those, because if you can get a topwater bite, sometimes you'd be surprised how early you can get in the year.
Yeah, and let's just point out to everybody who's not really familiar with you, except for meeting you today, Chris. Chris does fish whenever it's legal, so all year for striped bass. So he's not looking at this as just a March until some other season opens. Chris doesn't care when the other season's open. He's out there fishing for striped bass. So he's not.
Don't care.
Yeah,
don't care about flounder. Don't care about tog. Don't Listen, there's great fish. I know, Ed. I know.
We're getting you togging this year. I don't care what you say.
Listen. I've watched so much tog fishing this winter, and I see these guys, John Skinner and all those, whatever fishing show I could find in the wintertime on YouTube, I watch. And I'm down for some tog fishing. I love catching flounder. I love catching weak fish. But again, the sooner I could start that topwater bite, I do that. And if it runs me till November, so be it. So then we go looking for redfish after that.
Yes. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second.
And then one last one from Bill D. We did touch on this. Our Back Bay mudflats, an area to work in the early spring. Absolutely. Chris, you don't have to answer it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so Bill and I were talking about, Bill is a Southern New Jersey guy. And Bill, at the beginning, we were talking about the mudflats. They will tend to heat quicker, especially on sunny days, and especially with this weather that we've been having lately. So I personally would not be shocked if the Back Bay mudflats / sounds throughout all of New Jersey are going to be on fire as soon as you're allowed to put a line in that water, because there are definitely fish in there, and it's definitely warming up in there a lot quicker than those 30-40 foot channels that go right by them. So I would definitely recommend that. So let's talk, before we hit the redfish, let's talk a little bit about, Chris, I do want to know your opinion on the closure of striped bass in New Jersey, and how you feel about that rule in New Jersey.
I understand the reasoning behind it, the original reasoning, as far as, bass, they group up in the winter, water gets cold, they hole up together, people snagging, and I understand that. But too often, responsible fishermen wind up biting the bullet and paying the price for irresponsible fishermen. Whole separate conversation, won't get into it. My thoughts on catch and release. Me personally, I'm all catch and release. It doesn't matter what I'm fishing for: redfish, striped bass, weak fish, freshwater trout. Everything gets released. That's just what I do. But I think that it should be open year round, and it should just be a targeted catch and release, just like we do with trout streams in Pennsylvania. I'm sure other areas do it too. I'm just not familiar, but we do a delayed harvest where it's artificial lures only, can't use any bait during certain time, and it's catch and release only. If we had more enforcement, which we talked again before, I see rarely any of that. Even in high profile poaching spots, you don't see anything there. I would like to see an investment in that end of it, so that they could be out there ensuring that it's responsible fishermen on the water, and not irresponsible poaching going on. I think we texted earlier about the mortality rate of striped bass and whatnot. And what I do know is that in the wintertime, they do go into shock a little bit, whatever. But again, the ones that I've caught accidentally, or whatever the case may have been in the wintertime, they're ready to rock. They have a ton of energy. They take off very quick, and they fight hard. So I don't believe in the closed season. People still go out and target, whether they want to say it or not. I'm not going to say that I've never done it in the past, but I can say that, in the last pretty much 2 years, I definitely have not done it this year. I've stayed away from that and found other things to do. But I just don't feel like I should pay a price if it's a nice warm winter and can't go out and, spend a half hour, 45 minutes, catch a fish or two because of, this outdated law that we just have difficulty changing. Makes no sense to me.
Yeah, there. To your point, there was a history of people snagging, which is big up with salmon fishing up in Alaska. Watch one of those game warden shows, and you'll see the people snagging. Yep. You can snag the stripers when it's really cold. Now you can't this year because it's not cold enough. They're still moving, but generally, so I'm throwing out the other side of it, Chris. Although I'm on your side. I come to the same conclusion, but just so that everybody understands the full scope of what the issue is, you can snag in the winter when it's really cold. Right. You also do have what is published as the mortality rate is 10. It's about 8 to 10% on released fish. And I do want to point out, you had mentioned that, if it's just artificial, that changes. And the reason is the stats behind this is it's a combined 10%. Let's just call it 10% worst case, right? 10% mortality rate, but that includes bait fishing and gut hooked and throat hooked fish.
Right.
99% of the fish caught, I'm guessing, on artificial lures that are being actively worked are not going to get gut hooked, and they're not going to get throat hooked. Certainly not gut hooked. You might get a deep throat type of issue in one of them, but so that would significantly reduce that 10% mortality if all of it is artificials. So I think that's the other part that people have to consider. We are going to have folks coming on to debate this. We're still working on that.
That's gonna be a fun one.
But
but I mean, maybe we should worry about certain areas. I know of the Delaware River, right? You can't target during the spawn, right? Isn't there certain areas there. So, but guys, but they still do it.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I'm not really a political guy when it comes to fishing. I know it's become this whole big political thing, and there's a lot of, hostile tempers out there about catch and release, about seasons, everything else. Here's the thing. I'm just a guy that loves to fish. And I love to do it year round. If they keep it closed, so be it. I'll go to PA, I'll trout fish, I'll, pickerel fish, whatever. But there's other ways of handling that. And I believe instead of closing it, it's not like when we close largemouth bass, right? I don't want to get off on a tangent. I know we're on a time thing, but when you close largemouth bass, right, it's during the spawn.
Right.
Okay. So I can understand because they sit on their beds. And I did it for years when I was a kid in Pennsylvania, where you see them on the beds, throw a spinnerbait out there or a rubber worm, you jig it across the bed and they're easy targets. They're easy targets to snag. So I get that. But, and I understand the whole, when they're holing up for the winter and whatnot, but I don't know. I know that people used to do that years ago. Everybody that I know, most people, they probably wouldn't even go out because it's so cold.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to go out and have the embarrassment of somebody seeing me or my name getting posted somewhere and saying, and anybody that knows me knows that I'm not going to be out there poaching fish. I'm not going to be keeping fish, whatever. Just want to get out, burn off some steam and try to catch some fish. So, but we have to bite the bullet for bad behavior. So
we definitely do. All right. So we're at an hour, but we got to keep going, Chris, because what we have not gotten to talk about personally, and this is a good time to do it with everyone. Let's talk about the hunt for the New Jersey redfish that I am still on and that you have beaten. You've beaten the game. You've gotten one on the board. So let's hear the story behind your New Jersey redfish from last year.
So I had heard for years about, redfish showing up in the fall. I had never really seen too many or really even knew anybody that had caught them. So 3 years ago, a buddy of mine told me on a certain beach, he's like, this guy last week, he got a couple. And when I'm like, there's just no way. Like, I'm out here all the time. And, there's no sight of them. Guys are telling me they're in the bay and they're boiling. And I'm like, it just can't be the case. So 2 years ago, I'm out with the Wakefield brothers, and we're fishing, and they lay into one and made me a believer. So after that, I really studied as far as their patterns, which a lot of it resembles striped bass. A lot of it doesn't change, but I think it's where to find them, whether it be an open beach, whether it be a pocket, whether it be closer to an inlet. I think that was the key that I really zoomed in on this year. And I'd say a week prior to that fish, I got on a big snapper blue bite at dusk, and there was a ton of spearing in the water. And I said, man, I guarantee if I come back in the morning, there's going to be stripers there. So I go back in the morning, I get 3 bass between 26, 28 inches, maybe in 20 minutes. I lose something big that breaks me off. The following morning I go back, I had something grab a plug, same spot, couldn't even turn her head toward me. And this was in the beginning of October. The big bite up north had just started.
Yeah, that's not a bass if you couldn't turn its head.
Right. And I'm not, I'm not using like huge tackle, but I've been fishing long enough where I know how to fish and how to turn a fish's head, and it didn't happen.
Right.
So a couple of days later, I'm off work. I go back. It wasn't the tide wasn't really high. It wasn't churned up too bad, but the water was very clear leading up to that. That day it was a little bit stained, but it was just nice small swell pattern coming in, and I found some nice pockets on the beach, which since I've washed away, but they were there, and I fished for literally 2.5 hours without a bite. But I knew that there was fish there. I knew that I had felt a couple grabs on the back, and was using soft plastic with a 3/8 ounce head. And next to last cast, it was one other guy on the beach, a block down from me. Nobody else out all morning. And I said, man, if I go home and I get skunked, I'm really going to be upset because I passed a lot of things to come. And that fish laid into it and just fought so different than anything else I'd ever hooked into in the surf. And I knew it was either a 30-pound bass, which, I could catch that in that area, but just everything wasn't lining up for that. And she wouldn't come up. So once she finally came up and I saw the tail and the wave and I saw the spot, I get chills just thinking about it now. Because again, anybody that, tries to catch one of those, or even if it's an incidental catch, I just thought, now I can't lose this fish because nobody's going to believe me at this point. Like, these horrible conditions today, and not that you can't catch redfish in horrible conditions. I mean, they like that churned up water, but I wound up getting the fish in, and it was special. It was, and what made it even better for me is, it was probably between 34 and 36 inches, which was just fantastic. It wasn't a dink; it was a special fish. Got a couple pictures, some actual pictures that I had somebody take. Yeah. They're not, I tried to take other pictures with it. Some of them came out okay, but I said, you know what, special fish. I called the guy down that was fishing down the beach, and we actually wound up knowing one another from like 15 or 20 years ago, fishing in Ocean City on jetties, early 2000s. He grabbed a couple pics and put her in the water and released her. But it made me a believer. I know the general area where I can go. It's a lot of work, but that proved it to me that, it doesn't matter. I mean, they're there and you can find them. It's you could tell. I'm like, I don't even know what to say. It's just special fish. I mean, I have 3 pictures in my house blown up of it. It's just it's more important than catching a tarpon in the Caribbean. I mean, they're abundant down there. You're supposed to catch those, right? You're supposed to catch snook, but to get a nice redfish like that was just it was great. And when you only hear maybe 2 or 3 caught, and some guys keep it under the cuff, but usually when guys catch them, it comes out. And
it'll eventually come out. Yeah.
Last couple of years, I think there were a couple more caught, but this year, I think it was very, very, very few. A lot of times they are in north of me or south of me, but in my general area to land that one that size, it was special.
Well, we have a mutual friend, Chris. It's up to like 5 or 6 last year.
It's a lot of work. I mean, there's some spots that. And that's funny because, that guy there, he's got 2 or 3 spots that, man, he's just the king of the game there. And sometimes it's all about location, right? Like I'm close, but he's really, really, really close. So when you could put that type of time in and narrow the tide down, because I think you're very, very dependent on the tide down here. Not that they're not dependent on tide elsewhere, but when you can narrow that in, whether it be a really strong outgoing or a dead low tide. It's magic. And I got a little upset, I think, when I saw his pictures earlier on in the year, and I'm like, man, how am I like those are coming from an area that like I really would not expect. And I'm in a target area and I'm not getting them. So when I finally got one, I really felt like welcome to the group and and part of the class. But that's a special fish. Yeah, and to be able to catch them on artificials again, up here, love it. But now I look back to the last couple years and some big fish I lost in the surf in that same general area in the fall. Fish I either couldn't turn or fish that just, fought so erratically, just through the hook. I honestly believe now, because first I thought, well, maybe they were big stray bluefish that moved in, but let's be honest, we haven't seen bluefish that size in a couple years down here. So now I'm sold that those were redfish, and I'm definitely going to commit to that even more this year to just hunt for them, really exclusively come late in the fall.
Well, I'll be out there. It's no secret that I've been looking for them. I found them. I haven't hooked one. Not in New Jersey. I've caught plenty of redfish, but not in New Jersey yet. So it's coming up. Thank you for sharing that story. That's
It's good
I
stuff.
mean, that's the kind of story that gets everybody like charged up for the upcoming season. You know, you're not going to be getting the redfish up in New Jersey early in the season, but
right.
they will start coming in the summer, late summer especially, and in through the fall. And they're nice size too. Now, the ones that I saw last year were not anywhere near the size that you were talking about.
Right.
But I also was, you were targeting them in the surf, and I was targeting them and looking for them in the backwaters. I'm looking for residents. So it, to me, was extremely exciting to see small redfish.
Yep.
Because they're not migrating up to spawn. They're small. I mean, they were probably 15, 20 inches. So it's, man, I just can't wait. I'm glad that you were able to come on and share that story, because people call a lot of fish unicorns, but the New Jersey unicorn right now is that redfish. And the only thing that you can say is it does exist. And there are people that have caught them. We have the video evidence. We have the photo evidence. They're not sharing their spots. Which
actually, I have a good spot that was shared.
And even when people catch them, like in your presence, until I think you actually catch one yourself, it's a weird feeling. And that was, in the fall when I wasn't feeling well, had some health problems. And I remember even before the fish went back in the water, I texted Chris Balaban from Tight Lines. We've been really close for years, and I was just so excited. I texted George Bucci like right away, and I said, because he gave me some tips a couple years ago, and we've always talked about it, and I know he's caught his share in the past, and I felt like, hey, like you like one of the boys now. It was so exciting. I just couldn't stop sharing my enjoyment, and those guys are just stellar guys and fantastic fishermen. And I feel like I owe them, part of that, because, they've helped me a lot over the years. And that was a day I won't forget anytime soon. Good stuff.
Yeah. And those are definitely people to reach out to and talk to. For those that have followed this live stream, actually the guys you mentioned were also guests on here. So if you know them from those previous episodes, you know that they know what they're doing. And Chris, you're right up there in that group of the guys that.
I'm not there. I'm not.
Look, I was talking with Frank Mahalik this weekend, and we were talking about the people that we like to surround ourselves with in fishing, and the groups that we stay closest to, and it's the people that are the humble guys that don't act like they know everything and don't really know how good they actually are. It's the other people around them that see it, and they just don't quite see it. And you're definitely in that group. George is definitely in the George is funny because I think he gets uncomfortable. I think, Chris, you probably do too, but
maybe not as uncomfortable as he does. I mean, George is a good friend, and we've had, we probably have a lot more conversations than we fish together. But it's guys like him that are waving the flag, not just for striped bass, but for fishing in general. And I've told George before. I mean, I admire George. I've admired him for a long time. Frank, I admire what you guys do here. And even though I'm kind of a loner and I don't fish with people very, very often, I love the people in that fishing community down here. They're such sportsmen. They're such professionals. They just, they really, really have perfected this craft. And, I love watching other people's success too. It's, whether it's, guys slaying, right, Ed, you and, the group of guys that you fish with a lot, 40, 50 pounders on eels, or whether it's me in the back bay, or, George and a couple guys, getting big fish on bottle plugs or whatnot. It's just, we share in everybody's joy. And, to me, it doesn't matter how you fish, whether you're bait fisherman, you're lure fisherman, you're light tackle, you're heavy tackle. When you see somebody with that passion, how can you not love that? I mean, that's what brings this community together. And I found peace in it. I found, a lot of things. So it's definitely, if you put me in that group, that's very special. That's very humbling, because again, I'm just a kid from Coatesville, PA, that grew up just learning how to fish, ride my bike. My father taught me at a young age, and I'll forever be grateful for him for doing that. And kept me out of trouble. And now I've met such a fantastic group of friends I probably would have never even known before. And half the people I know, I've never met. Right. I've never met. I've never fished with.
Yeah.
I may never meet them in person, but we talk online like we fish together all the time, or we went to high school, and that's a connection. That's a real connection, not this nonsense that people use social media for and all this propaganda and bullying or putting people down or whatever. It's just community that we put together that you guys, I love the shows you guys do. I just love this platform. I told you before, the big thing for me coming on is I just love to talk about this. I love to talk about fishing. I get so animated. I might slip sometimes and talk about things I shouldn't talk about, or places or whatever, but that's okay. I mean, everybody spoils it on social media, spot burning anyway, but it's just a great community, and I love being on with you guys. So.
Well, we're glad that you're on. We're going to have to wrap it up on this one. So Chris, thanks again for coming on.
Appreciate you.
Thank you to everybody for tuning into this one.
Yep.
This was a fun one for me. I think that you should have some information for when the season opens in your area, or if it's already open. I mean, this information works. I don't care if, like I mentioned earlier, if you're on the Housatonic up in Connecticut, or if you're down on the Patapsco down in the Chesapeake, off the Chesapeake Bay, it's all going to work for you. Correct. So bring it with you, and hopefully you get a little charged up to get out there, because now I'm totally amped to get out.
It's going to be tough for me not to go right now. So
I know. Luckily, I have a couple hours between me and the water, so it's a no-go. For everyone tuning in, thanks again. We're going to be back next Monday. It's going to be a coach's show, so I can tell you right now that it's going to be open. Everybody all up and down the coast throughout the country. Any questions you have on fishing, the Salt Strong coaches will do our best to answer them the best way possible. So until next week, until next episode, get out there. Get on the water and get some tight lines.